The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You know who's not broke? The Washington Commanders. The projection for the salary cap came out yesterday. They haven't completely finalized it, but it's going to go up about $22 million a team, meaning the Commanders will have $82 million in salary cap room to work with. Myles Garrett, come on down. We'll talk about that. Mike Lang has passed away, one of the great announcers, not just hockey announcers in history. Some legendary calls during his career, which we will get to. And salary cap talk in baseball ramping up. They got 2 more years under the collective bargaining agreement, but the salary cap could be coming to baseball in 2 years. We'll get to that and a whole lot more. Just to pass along a couple of thoughts here before we get rolling about where we are and how you feel. Just remember this: most of us value the truth. Okay, that's really all I can say about that. And hopefully, the way that you were raised, the way that I was raised, that the truth matters, and hopefully, the truth will ultimately prevail. Okay, enough on that. The cap, and this is amazing. The NFL, how well they put out money for all of Roger Goodell's boobery, and I think at times he's a clown. He's the commissioner of the NFL for as long as he wants to be, as long as he continues to produce numbers like this. It's hard to imagine this. Just 10 years ago, the salary cap was $143 million. In 2025, 10 years later, it could be as high as $281.5 million, almost double what it was 10 years ago. And a lot of it has to do with media rights. The deal that the league signed, boy, if they could go back and do that again, they would not make it the way they did it. But what they do is they continue to strip mine. And the latest is that Netflix wants to put together a Sunday afternoon package. Well, if that happens, then you're taking games away from CBS and from Fox and giving them to a partner that didn't produce any revenue last year for those games. Not that it could happen this year, but it could happen maybe in 2 years. And it's just absolutely amazing. Now, managing the cap is an important thing too, because the Saints, who stink, they're projected to be $60 million over the cap, according to the Mark Maskey story in the Post today. And they've got tough things that they have to deal with, such as Derek Carr, who has 2 more years left on his contract. But Washington, and all credit to the new regime for this, but they also benefited from the fact that Dan Snyder was selling the team 3 years ago, and because of that, he wasn't going to spend any money. So, if you're going to stink, you might as well stink cheap, because when you start to get good and you hit the lottery at quarterback, as they did with Jaden Daniels, then you can supplement him with lots and lots of cap room, which they have right now. So let's see. Adam Peters, you're on the clock, and free agency gets going in less than a month, and we'll see what he comes up with. Last year he did a hell of a job and didn't really spend much. It's like, whoa, look at all this cap room he's got. Let's see what he does. But he doesn't spend foolishly. And, to absorb the Myles Garrett contract will be rather expensive. They'll have to do that. But, that's what the cap room is there for. And this is a go-for-it couple of years for them, because of the fact you have Jaden Daniels under a rookie contract where they're paying him roughly $6.5 million over the next 2 years. That is nothing. And with $82 million in cap space and $281 million as much as on your payroll, you can afford to do some things. And you don't want to get nuts. You don't want to spend foolishly for Albert Hainsworths of the world, but this guy is far from that. He's a proven competitor. I liked everything he said during Super Bowl week about his circumstance. Yes, he did ask for a trade, but he's not going to be a jerk about it, and even allowed for the fact that Cleveland may hold on to him. That could happen too. But it is rather intriguing to see what Adam Peters can do this year in a situation that is completely different than last year. A year ago, even though they knew they were going to take Jaden Daniels, even though that was, a foregone conclusion within the organization, they didn't know he's going to be this good. And when you got a quarterback this good, as we saw with Seattle over a decade ago with Russell Wilson under a rookie deal that was even less than what we had with Daniels because Russell Wilson was a third-round pick, but they were able to go to back-to-back Super Bowls with him. I think the second one was under a contract extension. But even still, you have flexibility when you have a great quarterback under a rookie deal, and that's what the Commanders have, and tons of cap room. We'll get to the baseball situation in the next hour. Tony and Mike weighing in on the cap possibility for baseball maybe in 2 years. They talked about that yesterday, and we'll get to that in the 10 o'clock hour. But tonight is a weird event, at least for me. Could you imagine that football announces, oh, yeah, we're going to have a championship game between the best team from the AFC and the best team from the NFC? Yeah, okay, maybe. Oh, wow, it's the Super Bowl. I'm not comparing what's happening tonight in Boston to that, but the Four Nations Faceoff was a big yawn for a lot of people like me, who I would say at best I'm a casual hockey fan. And I think there are a lot of people who are, even more invested in the sport than I am, and some even close to hardcore, who said, I don't know. These all-star games, look what's happened in the NBA. Well, nobody could have expected this. And there is great anticipation for the 8 o'clock face-off tonight between Canada and the U.S. in Boston, the rematch from an earlier round where the U.S. won that game, a game that started with 3 fights in the first 9 seconds of the game. And one of the stars of the U.S. is Austin Matthews, who, let's see if we can follow along with this. He was born in California, so he's an American. He plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs, so he plays in Canada. His teammates, in many cases, are Canadians. He will be on the ice tonight for his country against his teammates. It's an odd set of circumstances, but this has worked spectacularly for the NHL. And they go at it tonight, and Matthews last night was with Scott Van Pelt on ESPN with a little preview of what we're going to see tonight in Boston.
I'm really, really obsessed isn't the right word, but I'm fascinated, Austin, by the way you guys in your sport talk about the boys in the room, all right? And like the idea of being part of that, a room, whether it's in the spring in the playoffs or something like this, where it's clear something means something to the group. If you could put us in the room with your group and let us get an idea of what Thursday means, how do you best describe it?
Oh, man, I think we're just amped for the opportunity. I mean, this whole, week and a half has been, so much fun. The camaraderie that we've built in the locker room, just spending time with guys that, it's been a while since some of us have played with each other, and we've all kind of gone our separate ways now in the NHL. But, man, the guys are just amped. It's going to be an awesome opportunity for us tomorrow.
When did you get an idea, Austin? Because we heard about this, and I've said on the show, I didn't have any idea it was going to be this big a deal. When did the chatter start to build man, this might be nuts?
I don't know. I think it was pretty evident it was going to be pretty intense from the first game. I mean, Canada, Sweden, we were just watching, and you could just see the pace, the physicality, and everything that went into it. And then obviously, last Saturday, U.S., Canada, it's been a while since, those two have gone at it. And, I think the rivalry has just kind of been brewing, and there's been a lot of tension. So just with the way that game started, I think, definitely got a lot of people's antennas up possibly. But I think the hockey that's been, played so far throughout this tournament's been top notch. It's been a lot of fun to be a part of. And I think from the fan perspective, it's been a lot of fun to watch too.
No doubt. And let's talk about Saturday in Montreal, shall we? I mean, I'm watching. The anthems are okay, here we go. And then we're 9 seconds in, and it's holy shit, it? This is what we're doing? Like, how does that happen, man? How does that moment become what it did?
I don't know. Those three guys are three ultimate competitors, guys that you love to have on your team. And, when it happened, I think it just got the bench, amped up, just the energy, the atmosphere was rocking there. And, I don't know. I've never been a part of something like that or experienced anything like that on the ice, but, I think it definitely got our attention as guys and teammates of theirs, and just set the tone for us right away. So it was pretty cool.
Speaking of guys you love to play with, I'm having a conversation with my boys at dinner. They're young, but I'm explaining to them that I'm going to talk to you. And they're like, well, wait, he plays in Canada, but he's playing for the United States. I'm like, yeah. And, well, you play with Mitch Marner, but now you don't because he plays for them. Like, how do you sort out, like, this is my guy, but he's not my guy Thursday? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think that's just the nature of the game, the nature of being competitors. I mean, I love Mitchie. He is my boy. But right now we're not playing for the same team. So as competitors, you do whatever it takes to go out and help your team win. So we'll be buddies again after tomorrow. But right now the main focus is on my team here.
As it should be. I just want to close with one final thought here. I can't think of a better place for it to be than Boston. You've been in that building for a Game 7 in the wrong sweater, but you're going to be in the right sweater Thursday night. What do you think it'll be like to have all of the building behind you and the boys Thursday night in a game that means what it means?
I'm looking forward to it. Like you said, I've been on the other side of that building, a couple times before, but it's one of the best away rinks in my opinion. The atmosphere is always great. So I'm looking forward to being on the right side. I know it's gonna be rocking, and I know I'm gonna get chills when I start hearing those USA chants. So,
what a cool thing, man! I appreciate you taking a minute. Everybody's really, really fired up to watch it. Good luck there, and as importantly, good health and good luck the rest of the way in the spring with your guys up in Toronto. All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's Austin Matthews, star center for the Maple Leafs with Scott Van Pelt last night. 8 o'clock face-off tonight in Boston, and latest on the tickets, they're going for like $1,500 a piece. It's it's not what happened in 1980 in Lake Placid, but that was a totally different circumstance, and that became the huge deal that it became afterwards. And it was not for the championship, but it was the U.S. beating the Soviet Union, and that remains iconic, all these years later. This game, if the U.S. wins, will it take on the feel of that? I'm not sure about that, but it will be meaningful. And I would hope that, unlike what happened in Montreal over the weekend when the U.S. played Canada the first time around in this matchup, in this tournament, that there was booing of the national anthem when they play the Canadian national anthem tonight in Boston. I would hope that there would not be booing on this, but politics are everywhere these days. Brendan Haywood said something interesting about the All-Star game, the NBA All-Star game. He played 13 years in the league, never played in an All-Star game. So his perspective, maybe a little bit skewed, I guess you could say here. He was on the CBS Sports Network. I think he works for them. He started his career here, by the way, with the Wizards. North Carolina guy, first couple of years in the league with Michael Jordan, who I think is the greatest competitor of all time. And Kobe Bryant is in the discussion as one of the greatest, and really made himself into the great player that he was in a large part because of his competitiveness. But Brendan Haywood says that essentially the NBA All-Star game jumped the shark after Kobe Bryant retired, which I believe was 2016. And he said, the All-Star game was so good in like the 90s because Michael Jordan took it seriously. Okay, maybe. He says if LeBron or whoever else you think is the face of the league at this moment, whether that's Ant-Man, whether that's Wemby, whether that's Joker, Jason Tatum, if those guys walked in there and said, yo, we're playing hard, that's where everybody is going to do. I tend to agree with that. I think that, the All-Star game and the league itself rode on the backs of great competitors like Jordan, like Magic Johnson, like Larry Bird, and there was a standard that was set. And the ridiculous way the game was played last year and this year maybe was a little bit better, but the reviews are not sterling. You do need that kind of leader to do that. And he said, when the quality, this is more from Hayward. He said, when the quality of the All-Star game really started to go down, when Kobe retired, he held the standard. Hey, listen, Kobe Bryant got his nose broken in an All-Star game. Picking up LeBron James, going back and forth with him, there was a level of competitiveness, and Kobe was always like, hey, I'm going to carry the mantle that Michael Jordan handed to me. Yeah, there is no feel of that right now. And if LeBron is the face of the league and the one who holds the standard, well, he shows up late for All-Star weekend, and then just hours before the game, he says, oh, yeah, I'm not playing. I got a bad ankle. Nah, that's not the way you do it. That's not the way you do it. And they played last night, and I kind of understand that he wanted to make sure he was rested up. They lost, by the way, to a bad team in Charlotte as the Lakers, try to make their second-half surge. But I guess there's something to be said for that. The best All-Star game, actually, that was played since Kobe retired was the one right after his death in 2020. And that's when Adam Silver named the trophy, the MVP trophy, after Kobe, and players seem to play hard for that. But, I've talked about this, that the players need to take responsibility for the league. They own the product. The NBA, more so than any other sport, builds its product around its stars. Players come and go in the NFL. It doesn't matter. If Patrick Mahomes woke up tomorrow and said, I don't want to play any more football, you think the ratings are going to drop for the Super Bowl or for any of the games that are played over the course of the season? Once again, I just said a few minutes ago that the salary cap just about doubled in the last 10 years. That tells you how successful they are as a TV product, no matter who's playing. And the stars from 10 years ago, many of them are gone. Most of them are gone. How many guys last 10 years in the NFL? So I think that if the players, really understood the importance of the league and the history of it and how guys, you didn't travel on charter flights, didn't make the kind of money they make now, didn't have guaranteed contracts, played hurt, played basketball in shoes that teenage girls now walk around in for style, the old Chuck Taylors. Have a little bit of respect for that and treat the game with a little bit more respect than you do in the All-Star game, and then you can have a product that people will be proud of instead of embarrassed by. All right, coming up, Mel Kiper. Never too early to get to Mel Kiper in the draft. We're about 2 months out, and he's got some news and notes as he talked on our morning show on Sportsmanlike yesterday. We'll get to that as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I mentioned in the update the Georgetown blowout of Providence last night, 93-72 at Capital One Arena, and they did it without their star freshman, Thomas Sorber, hurt, and to get a blowout of a team that they had lost to pretty soundly last month at Providence indicates improvement. The coach of Georgetown, Ed Cooley, playing with a heavy heart. His mother just passed away, and so it was kind of an emotional night for him, as well as the fact that he was playing his former team. He was the coach at Providence forever, and people thought he would be a lifer there, but came to Georgetown a couple of years ago to rescue a program that had been, let's face it, as great a player as Patrick Ewing was, and he did get the Hoyas to the tournament one year during the COVID year. They miraculously won the Big East tournament, but as a head coach, you'd have to say he was a disaster. He had some of the worst seasons in the history of the school. Great man, great player, just didn't work out for him as a head coach at Georgetown. And Cooley has turned things around. I don't know if they'll be in the tournament this year. It's very unlikely unless they, somehow win the Big East tournament. But they're 16-10, and they're 7-8, I believe, in the conference. So, they're having a good year. And I keep looking at the attendance for these games, and it's a problem where they play. It's a 20,000-seat arena, and they drew an announced crowd of 5,326. It was a really cold Wednesday night, 7 o'clock start, which, is not the easiest to get to if you're going to go home first and then, schlep back downtown or however it is. Maybe you live close there, whatever it is. It's just not happening. And they can't build an on-campus arena because they don't have the access the Georgetown campus. But I don't know what the answer is. I mean, even if they had a team that was a top 10 team, I still don't think they'd be packing that place. And there's really nothing in between. You know, their arena on campus, they played there for years. I mean, it wasn't until they got into the Big East in the late 70s that they started playing at the what was then the Capitol Center. And I don't know if there's an in-between place, but when you play in a cavernous arena with 20,000 seats and you're only putting 5,000 people in the building, that's not a home court advantage. That's tough to do. And I applaud Ed Cooley for what he's doing. He's done a good job there. They had a bad year last year, but he's gotten players in there, and they've been competitive. They've been good. 16-10 compared to what they had in the years of Ewing, that's tremendous. I mean, even the last few years of John Thompson III, who had initial success getting them to the Final Four, but then, really tailed off. And even when he'd have like good years and get to the tournament, they got knocked out early. Upsets, they would go in like a 2 seed and lose. So, I think Cooley's doing what he set out to do, but you got to get some people there, and I don't know how you do it. I just don't know because, the student situation, like even with Maryland. Maryland played a game against Iowa on Sunday night at 5 o'clock. If you're a student on campus at 5 o'clock on a Sunday and you have any interest in sports, how does that interfere with anything you're doing at that time of day? Oh, I really wanted to watch 60 Minutes? No, you go to the game, a conference game. And they had a spectacular second half as they blew out Iowa. And even that student section was thin. And with Georgetown, it's a chore to get there. The buses are free, but you got to get on a bus. You sit in rush hour traffic, like 7 o'clock game. You got to get from Georgetown to Capital One Arena. I know it's not a great distance, but there's no way to get there like, with a rocket ship. You got to go through downtown traffic to get there. And then, coming back, it's not that late. It's and maybe you want to stay downtown. The other problem with that is, too, for the student body, let's say you took one of the free buses to the arena and you want to hang out in around the arena, around the Capital One, the restaurants and stuff there. Well, you want to get back to Georgetown? There's no subway. You got to take an Uber. So I don't know what the answer is, but good for Ed Cooley for making the program relevant again. But the problem is the attendance is not showing it. I mean, it got so bad under Ewing that if you showed up at the box office and you produced an ID that said you lived in the District of Columbia, they would give you 4 free tickets. Maybe they ought to just continue that. I don't know. Maybe it's more compelling to go out to watch a team that's winning, but you got to get more fannies in the seats. You got to create an atmosphere that's great for college basketball, and you really feel it through the television too. Watching it last night, it was, of course, they got off to this big lead, and the game was sort of out of hand. But my God, I mean, that's something that they got to think about. All right, draft coming up. Less than 2 months, and it's in Green Bay this year. They once they started moving into these cities, this was a happy accident, by the way, for the NFL. This goes back 7 or 8 years. They'd always held it at Radio City Music Hall, and they first it was Radio City, then they had it, I think, at Madison Square Garden. Whatever it was, they had it at places that were used year to year in New York. And then, for whatever reason, it wasn't available, and they moved it to, I'm trying to remember, was it Chicago? But they moved it to another city, and now cities are bidding on it. We'd like to get it here in Washington at some point. Wouldn't that be great to have it down on the mall? But Green Bay gets it this year, and Mel Kiper is the man for the draft. He has covered it for 47 years. I think Mel, more than anybody, has made the draft as popular as it is. I think he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He doesn't think he'll get there, but I think he should get in. And he goes on our morning show every Wednesday on Unsportsmanlike. And yesterday, taking a look at Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winner from Colorado, who played both ways as a cornerback and a wide receiver, though when he goes to the Combine in a couple of weeks, he's going to be working out exclusively as a corner. Mel's speculating on what will ultimately happen with him in the NFL, depending on who drafts him and what position he plays.
I would let it play out. I don't think nobody really can say for sure right now what is his best position going to be. I would just let the NFL team that drafts him, let him show what he is. Is he a lockdown corner? We don't know that until he gets to the NFL. Is he an elite receiving entity? We won't know that until he shows he can do those things. So I think it's going to be wide receiver myself and then work in as a corner in the playoffs and big games, whatever. But, hey, I could be proven wrong on that. But I do think this. Travis Hunter will define that. And once he does, then that's the position he's exclusive at. And then you work him in, like I say, in those big games, playoffs for the first 2-3 years of his career or whatever. Maybe he does it until he's 28. I don't know. But you can't use them both ways for a full game, for a full year. We know that. So I think it's going to have to play out by what Travis Hunter proves to be his best pro position.
Mel, I want to talk about another wide receiver in this draft, and that's Luther Burden out of Missouri. Being a St. Louis girl, I've watched him. I think he's one of those guys that can be a great weapon to add to different offenses. He's projected to be going in the first round. What do you think about Luther Burden, and where do you think would be a good landing spot for him?
Michelle's a great question because he's one of those. I always have a list of about 15, 20 players that there's kind of opinions all over the place on. And he's one of those 15, 20 guys really at the top of the at or near the top of that list. That he had that great year. He had a great high grade coming in. He was a highly rated kid, as you know, coming out of high school. He didn't have the production. He didn't show up. He didn't pop in games until late. He did have some big catches late in the game. I remember Missouri was kind of the cardiac kids. Yeah. They were coming back and back. I had the under on them for the year, for season total, and they almost beat me because they were winning all those games that they really shouldn't have won. And then finally, remember, they got the lead against South Carolina, and South Carolina came back and won it late, or they would have gone over the total, which was amazing, even won their bowl game in dramatic fashion. So he was a part of a lot of those comebacks, but Theo Weiss outproduced them. So that's the thing where you look at Luther Burden. Where could he go? I think he could go as high as 13 in that particular area, and that's where I had him in the Mach 1.0 to Dallas. He could drop down into the 20s. So like I say, it's a wide range of opinion on where Luther Burden III will go in the first round.
Mel, as we approach the Combine coming up starting the 24th, after all of these years doing this, as long as you have, you look at the NFL Draft Combine, the Scouting Combine, as a great usage of time or a waste of time?
I think it's interesting. I think it's an important part because you do get the measurables, and the measurables are a way of separating players at a position that you have similar grades with those guys who test better. It's not going to be a defining, point of I'm going to move him up or move him down based on how he works out. That's not going to be how he's defined as a player, but it will allow you to separate players at positions based on measurables that, frankly, we don't have yet until the Combine. Accurate measurables, and I'm big into arm length. And I'm huge on that in football. Chris knows how important that is along the lines in terms of cornerbacks that get a finger on a pass to break it up or they don't, or they intercept the pass or they don't, or a linebacker. Same. Arm length for a lot of positions is just about all of them is critical. So to me, that's what you get out of the Combine. And, of course, I'm not part of it. Nobody outside of the NFL is a part of the interview process except those people. That's critical. The medical is going to be critical for a lot of these guys. Savone Revel Jr. had the knee injury in practice in September. When is he going to be coming back from that? They'll know that based on the medical. Coming out of East Carolina, he had a first-round grade. Obviously, you think about Josh Simmons, great left tackle out of Ohio State, injured in that Oregon game, October knee injury. How is he progressing? When will he be back? There's a lot. Benjamin Morrison had the hip at Notre Dame. They're a great corner. When will he be ready to go? So all those things from a medical standpoint will be critical to see if these guys will go close to as high as they were projected to go prior to their injury.
Mel, as we get ready for the Combine next week, who's the most intriguing prospect that you expect will work out in Indy next week?
I think Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, whatever his measurables are, Combine Pro Day, the defensive end from Texas A&M, only had 1.5 sacks the last couple of years. Hadn't had the production we talked about that you need to have to be elite, but he is an elite talent, and he did pop, and he does have great versatility. I think Azareye'h Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State, has great length. He should work out well. He's got the ability. He surprised me by coming out early. I thought he would go back. I think he's a kid you want to watch and see how he tests because I think he's a guy certainly after the combine, could gain some momentum. Then you look at a guy like Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Everybody's talking about Mason Graham. Mason Graham's a great player. He's going to go in the top 5, top 6 overall, defensive tackle out of Michigan. But the other defensive tackle out of Michigan, Kenneth Grant, is going to probably test really well. He was a heck of a football player, and he's kind of flying a little under the radar in terms of the first round.
Mel, who's a player out there whose combine you still remember or still talk about that either impressed you or really changed your opinion of them?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't thought about it, Michelle. I do remember, the Xavier Worthy last year. Just I'm still having visions of him still running that 4.21. He's still running, and he had a great year at Kansas City, and people doubted him. And I had a pretty good grade on him going in, and I moved him up a little, and I said, okay, that takes him out of that late first round discussion. Where'd he go? He went in the late first round. So despite running a 4.21, despite having great production at Texas, despite being a tough guy who was a football player, not a track guy, not just a speed guy who could play football as well, he dropped, and Buffalo didn't take him, let Kansas City jump into that spot and get him. So that was kind of a surprise on draft day that Buffalo would pass on him and ended up with Keon Coleman. Kansas City moved up to get him. And the fact that a kid who's that fast, was that productive, and that tough, I saw him catch a ball, run a route, catch a pass, and then instead of going out of bounds, go back in and put a shoulder into a corner or safety or linebacker. So when you saw the toughness and you saw the passion for the game and you saw him run that 4.21, I came out of the combine thinking, boy, he's going to go pretty high. And he didn't. So sometimes the combine, which you think will be something that moves a guy up, it doesn't. So in Worthy's case, it didn't seem to matter to people in the league. I guess they thought he was too thin. And even some of the former NFL guys said, they'll beat him up. He won't get off the line of scrimmage. He won't be the guy in the NFL. He's too thin, too skinny. Doesn't weigh enough. Well, that proved wrong. As a rookie, he was a heck of a player.
Mel, last question from me. Combine marks the beginning of line season around the NFL, right? Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear from Combine through the NFL draft. So I'm curious from your perspective, who are the teams, the front offices that do the best job this time of year, being able to navigate the noise, evaluate players coming out of the collegiate ranks, and make the best assessments when it comes to overall value in the NFL draft?
Nobody does it better than Philadelphia and Baltimore. Howie Roseman, Eric DeCosta, they do the best job of lining it up, getting players that people overlook. Look at the Ravens. Roger Rosengarten had a heck of a rookie year. He may be the left tackle, depending on what happens with Ronnie Stanley, but had a great year at right tackle, really developed and improved, which is something I don't think people understand. You can improve once you're in the NFL, okay? And he did, and that great coaching led to that, I think, in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles, what they were able to do. Howie Roseman, everything he touches turns to gold. I say he's going to be a Hall of Fame GM. Kansas City does a great job with Veach. Certainly Les Snead with the L.A. Rams. Those are the ones that come to mind. And just to Michelle's question, I think we were talking about Tom Brady. Tom Brady, talking about combines, worst 40-time inverse vertical jump of any quarterback I ever evaluated in 47 years of doing this. So that tells you if you worry about what a quarterback runs or you worry about how athletic a quarterback is, you're kind of wasting your time.
That's a Mel Kiper yesterday on our morning show on Sportsmanlike. If you've seen, they think he did a 30 for 30 on that 2000 draft, and the shots of Brady with like a man bod, dad bod, excuse me, and his running of the 40. Yeah, so you just can't tell, and it is as they say, the underwear Olympics, and you also have workout warriors and guys who look great at the combine and don't turn out to be that great. The best example of this goes back quite a ways, might be 25 years ago, maybe more. There was a player out of Boston College named Mike Mamula. And Mike Mamula was one of the early guys who understood what the combine was about. So he trained specifically for the events at the combine. And he had unbelievable combine numbers. It didn't match up with his skills as a football player. He went into that combine projected like a mid-round pick, and he wound up as a first-rounder, and he was a bust. He looked great in running drills, but once you get on the field, like Brian Mitchell often says, he says there's speed and there's football speed, and your speed is a little bit different when somebody's chasing you, or in his case, sometimes running over people. So, take it for what it's worth, but what Mel does say about the combine is that there are some measurables that you pay attention to. Now, sometimes people get overly worked up about hand size. Oh, my God, you can't throw a football. You got small hands. Well, sometimes that's overrated too. And you can't really measure what's inside the head and what's inside the heart. And that's where you really, find out about these guys. Sometimes you can get a sense of that in the interviews, but you got to find guys who love football. That's the thing. And I remember Chris Cooley saying this to me years and years ago. You'd be surprised how many guys don't love football. They do it because they're good at it, and they make a lot of money doing it. But you got to find guys who really love the game, and those are the ones that are going to help turn you into a winning team. In the sports radio business, when you get into the dead of summer, you're always looking for caller topics. Who's the best? What's the best sports movie of all time? Who's the best quarterback? And sometimes you drift into best announcer. And I think there's a consensus for baseball that the best to ever do it was Vin Scully. There have been other great baseball announcers. Don't sell them short. We got some really good ones in town here, and Charlie and Dave, who do the Nats, they're outstanding. But I think most people would acknowledge that Scully, who did the Dodgers for, I think it was 65 years, was the best to ever do it. He was just that good. When you get to basketball, for me, it's Marv Albert. Chick Hearn, who did the Lakers for many, many decades, was outstanding. There are others who might be in the conversation. Football, some say it's Pat Summerall. Maybe it's Al Michaels. Maybe it's somebody else. There are great football announcers as well. Then you get to hockey, and I think what Scully was to baseball was Doc Emmerich was to hockey. He did hockey games forever. He was just terrific. Retired several years ago, but was as good as anyone who's ever done it. And then, everybody has their favorite locals. And, you want to talk about your own guy, you can. There have been great, other local hockey announcers, but among the best has to have been Mike Lang. Mike Lang has just died at the age of 76. He spent almost 50 years doing the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they had 5 Stanley Cup championships under his working relationship with the team. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2001 when he received the Foster Hewitt Award for Broadcast Excellence. He called games in the Western Hockey League before a one-year deal with the Penguins in 1974, but they had financial difficulties, so he didn't do the team the next year, but came back for good in 1976. Did not miss a single game for 30 years. How about that? I think Ron Weber had a streak like that when he did the Capitals. He was the original Caps announcer when they came into the league in 1974 and did it for, I don't know how many years. I think he was replaced by Steve Colby at the start of the 97-98 season, the year they made the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time. But, Mike Lang was the gold standard for many. He did both television and radio, but eventually became full-time radio in 2006. And he had these great goal calls, and that's what he's most remembered for. He did the team Stanley Cup wins in 2009, 2016, and 2017 before retiring in August of 2021 after doing the Penguins for 46 years. And they honored him in October of that year for 50 years as a hockey announcer. If you're not familiar with his work, there have been many of these put together, these montages of his great goals. This was one that was put together by TSN. Hockey is their specialty in Canada, and this is their selection for the top 10 Mike Lang calls.
Crosby's pass to Marian Hossa. Stutter steps, goes into the Flyers in. Through people and fire, scored! Oh, what a play by Hossa! He turns! Goaltender Moran inside out, and he just lost his liquor license.
Crosby looking. Loose in front. Still a loose puck picked up by Rookie. Shoots and scores! And Sidney Crosby has scored his first goal ever in a Pittsburgh Penguins uniform. Oh, slap me silly, Sidney. Crosby's going to take it off Koskela. He shoots and scores. Oh, slap me silly, Sidney. Malkin still on here from the power play. Walks out and shoots. Scores! Evgeny Malkin from the right wing circle. And the Penguins take a 1-0 lead. Oh, save my face with a rusty razor. Here's Ulf Samuelsson shooting and scoring. He gets his second goal. Ulf Samuelsson gets the Penguins their 6th goal. Now he's smiling like a butcher's dog. Over to Murphy. Shooting, scoring, deflected by Jágr, I believe. Jágr may have got a stick on it. The Penguins have taken an early 1-0 lead.
Oh, Murphy and the fans are smiling like a butcher's dog. Andrew takes a shot. Save made. Rebound. Walker can't put it in. Score! Brown gets the goal. The Penguins get their fourth, and they lead 4-2. Oh, let's go hunt moose on a Harley. Gets the slap. Save made. Rebound. Oh, scratch my back with a hacksaw. Kurt McLean doesn't know whether to cry or wind his watch. McLean doesn't know whether to cry or wind his watch. And poor Theodore doesn't know whether to cry or wind his watch. Back down to Yager. Fires. He gets his third of the night. The hat trick for Jaromir Jagr. And here come the hats. At the Mellon Arena. Ladies and gentlemen, you got it. Elvis has just left the building. There he is, holds it. Nelson scored as he beats Theodore like a rented mule. Joey Mullen taps it by Van Beesbrook, and he beats him like a rented mule. Jaromir Jagr beats Luongo like a rented mule. Artie Straka beats Tommy Salo. He beat him like a rented mule. 5 seconds to go. Loose around to the far corner. 2 seconds. The Penguins are going to win the Stanley Cup, I believe. Stelio shoots it blocked. The Penguins have won the Stanley Cup. Oh, Lord Stanley, get me the brandy.
And that is probably his most famous one. Lord Stanley, bring me the brandy. They didn't have to make sense. Let's go hunt moose on a Harley. You know, fine. But it just worked. And the one where he beat him like a rented mule. They remember Keith Olbermann when he was doing SportsCenter with Dan Patrick, and they would show a goal, and Olbermann liked to say that he beat him like a rented goalie. You know, those were when you become that iconic that people use your calls in that kind of way. That tells you how popular he was. There was a movie called Sudden Death, came out 30 years ago with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And it was set in I guess the backdrop of the Stanley Cup Finals between the Penguins and the Blackhawks, and Mike Lang appears in that. But boy, you know, for someone who is a casual hockey fan like me, that's the kind of call that will bring you into the arena. That will make you want to listen to his calls, and people who I know are big hockey people like Al Koken. They regard Mike Lang as one of the best, if not the best of all time. So rest in peace, Mike Lang. Coming up in the next hour, we'll look at the salary cap in baseball, which may or may not be getting some momentum. David Rubenstein says the owners should have it. Tony and Mike with their thoughts on PTI and more as we continue. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. Meaningful games in September. Nats spent essentially nothing in the offseason. They're in a division with teams that spend wildly. The Phillies, the Mets, the Braves. They're all projected to be much better than the Nats. But Davey Martinez had a team that was 19-31 and went on to win the World Series, is dreaming big in spring training. We'll get to his thoughts coming up. Chuck Pagano is back as a coach in Baltimore, once their defensive coordinator. Now he's back as a secondary coach and pumped up. He takes you a little inside the organization, why they have been so successful for so many years with a coach who's about to begin his 18th season as head coach. How about that division, by the way? The AFC North, where you got two coaches, year 18, in an era where that just does not happen. You know, Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh. My God, that's remarkable. So Chuck Pagano did a podcast with a couple of people who work for the Ravens, and we'll get to that coming up shortly. And what do we make of the Nats? You know, I've said this a lot, that I'm still of a generation that I look up and I go, wow, we got baseball, because we went so many years without it. And it's season number 20 for the Nationals, which, you know, seems hard to believe. And, you know, having watched the expansion Senators, that was the team of my youth, went to my first game in 66, and they left town in 71, never really became an Orioles fan. But I look at my dad, who was a Senators fan going back to the early 40s, and he saw mostly losing baseball. I saw mostly losing baseball. One winning season, 1969, with Ted Williams, and then no baseball at all. And we have had a period of great success in this town starting in 2012 when I think the Nationals won like a year early. I don't think they were expected to be that good that soon. And they had a division winner, which, should have gotten by the Cardinals. They had a 6-2 lead in Game 5 of that series, and they let it get away. And, who knows how far they could have gone had they won that series. But they stayed competitive. They had teams that were playoff regulars over the years. And then 2019, the unthinkable happens that the Washington team wins the World Series. And you look at Boston, 86 years, 108 before the Cubs won their second World Series. So, things are you have to have them in perspective. But the team's not good now. It's not good now, and they don't spend money. And the latest is they signed a relief pitcher named Lucas Sims yesterday. He went 1-6 with an ERA of 4.38. That's a bad ERA for a relief pitcher. Had 58 appearances with Cincinnati and Boston. And he's been around for a while. He's had 8 major league seasons. He's pitched for the Braves, pitched for the Reds, the Red Sox, and they now have a little bit more bullpen help. But it's a young team, and it's a team that is, I think, going to get better, but there aren't a lot of veterans around to lead the way. Yet, Davey Martinez, and maybe this is his job to say these kind of things, Davey Martinez has goals which he thinks are realistic for the Nationals.
Play meaningful games in September. That's what I'm striving for. If we can do that, anything can happen. So, and I think this group can do it. I said earlier in January, I hear a lot about how our core guys are going to be really good and they're coming and they're. I don't really want to hear that anymore. I told them today, we're here. This is the core guys. This is the guys that we anticipated would be here. You guys are here. You got your feet wet. It's time to go out there and perform every day, and go 1-0 every day. I mean, that's the gist of it. I want to win, and I let them know today that's what we're here for. We're here to win games, and play good competitive baseball every day. So. We're going to take the best 26 guys, and I think we have a core guys, not only that we're going to start with, but some guys that can help us along the way as well. So I'm excited about that.
Okay, well, meaningful games in September. They're not in the same division as the Dodgers, but the spending it's polar opposite. The Nationals are 24th in salary, and that includes the Steven Strasburg deal, which has 2 more years to go. Which is, what he signed, the $245 million deal over 7 years. So it's, $30 million plus of that cap, not that cap, but of that number. Whereas the Dodgers, it's another world. The commissioner is in an interesting spot here. He works for the owners, and he can't say the Dodgers are bad for baseball. He's got to say the Dodgers are good for baseball. But he's also got to protect the other owners who are not spending what their revenue would suggest. And last week, Scott Boras talked about that as well. He said, we looking at the payrolls and the revenue doesn't match up to the spending. And we got teams that are way below what they could be spending, even the high market teams. Rob Manfred, when he was talking the other day, discussed what the Dodgers are doing, and he declared them good for baseball.
The Dodgers have gone out and done everything possible, always within the rules that currently exist, to put the best possible team on the field, and I think that's a great thing for the game. That type of competitive spirit is what people want to see. By the same token, I said this at the owners' meetings, I'll say it again, it's clear that we have fans in some markets that are concerned about the ability of the team in their market to compete with the financial resources of the Dodgers. And I think if we've been consistent on one point, it is we try to listen to our fans on topics like this. And I have heard people on this, believe me. I get a lot of emails about it.
Yeah. So on one hand, he says the Dodgers are good for baseball, but on the other hand, the teams that are in markets or with ownership that's not going to spend that money, it's not realistic that they can be competitive. David Rubenstein can be competitive. He's one of the richest men in the world, and owns the Orioles. He has upped the payroll. They've bumped it up 53% from last year, but they're still miles away from what the Dodgers are spending. And he has been one that has pushed for a cap. Their other owners have done this, but he's now sort of leading the way on this. It's 2 years before they can do anything. They got 2 more years under the collective bargaining agreement. But if you missed this was Rubenstein the other day at the Orioles spring training camp on what he believes baseball needs to do.
The best way to phrase it is I think everybody in baseball wants to have a competitive environment so that every fan thinks that every team can win any given year. And so having a competitive environment is what we want and what I think every other owners want. And ultimately, I think that's what I think the fans really want too, is a competitive environment. So no matter what city you live in, you think your team can win that year when the season begins. And that's what I'm mostly focused on.
What would you say to the people who would argue that a salary cap benefits owners of Major League Baseball and not the players of Major League Baseball?
Well, I don't want to, let me just say generically, if you look at other sports, the other sports which have that kind of arrangement seem to have players that are pretty happy with the situation. So I can't address the baseball situation, but I would say my impression is that players in other leagues seem to be okay, but I can't address how that would affect baseball or something like that. But so I'm not sure anybody's thinking that the players in other leagues are thinking they're in bad shape.
Well, in basketball, they have a cap, and the contracts are guaranteed. Football, they have a cap, but the contracts are not guaranteed. They can put a lot of guaranteed money into them with signing bonuses and so forth, but they pretty much held the line, and the fact that Deshaun Watson turned out to be such a disaster for the Cleveland Browns, the owners are going to hold the line on this, and it's a little bit different. Baseball, the contracts are guaranteed. What does that mean in the long term for a salary cap? We don't know, but the players have resisted it. They've made sure that they don't have it. The problem you're going to have, though, is if you don't have a cap, you also don't have a floor. And when you have a cap, there's a minimum amount of money that has to be spent. And that could, at least for the rank and file of the union, which is what they represent, what the Players Association represents, that could be good for them in the long term, that they would get money that would have to be spent, and therefore, players who are, not in the Shohei Ohtani, tax bracket would be able to get, much more money and reasonable salaries. Tony and Mike with a look at this yesterday on PTI, given what Rob Manfred said, what you heard from David Rubenstein. This is Tony and Mike's take on the cap.
Sean, would you like to see a cap, or do you like it when one team has the ability to outspend the others?
All right, so if you put the question that way, I'm going to say I would like to see a salary cap in baseball. I like baseball. I like competitive balance. At least theoretically, a salary cap could give you that. But the players are not going to voluntarily go for a salary cap, because if you have a salary cap, Mike, you don't get a Juan Soto contract. And every single person in the major leagues is hoping that they get hit by lightning and that they get that miracle contract as well. So the players are not. They're just simply not going to give that up. This is a question about the Dodgers. Does the Dodgers spending bother us to such a degree that we want to do away with it? It's not just the Dodgers. It's the Yankees over the years. It's the Red Sox. The Mets, it's the Phillies. It's the Cubs. It's the Padres. It's the Mets. It's the Houston sometimes. It's even the Texas Rangers sometimes. And that's the group that wins the World Series. And it suggests a correlation between spending a lot of money and winning. That the correlation's there. Occasionally it's not that way. Kansas City won the World Series in 2015. Milwaukee gets into the playoffs every year. Tampa Bay, I think, made the World Series a couple of times. But mostly, Mike, the teams that spend the most money get in. Yes.
Yeah, Tony, it's interesting. Salary cap, and you're right about the players. And that union has more power than all the other player unions combined, times 50. Yes. So that's not going away. They're going to adopt that easily. I look at it, I think the NHL has been diminished by a salary cap, because it's too punitive to the teams that win immediately. And you prevent essentially a dynasty, and you almost legislate in a certain kind of parity. You could say the NBA's worked because the NBA starting lineup, my God, you got to have 3 players in that starting lineup who make at least $30 million a year, or you don't have a squad. Not really. Oklahoma City, they'll get there and they'll have to dismantle. When they get there, they're not there yet. They're the exception. But Tony, so it's worked for the NBA. I don't think it's worked as well for the NHL, other than the owners, not for the fans. I don't think it has. So
works in football.
It seems to work in football, but parity was already existing in pro football. Yeah. It didn't change the makeup. Man, baseball, it would change the very way business is done. But the whining that is coming from some of the other owners, the Yankees, a guy named Steinbrenner, a guy whose surname is Steinbrenner's whining is so unseemly. And the Red Sox can do what they want. The Cubs don't spend because they don't have to, because there's no pressure on them in a civic way to do it. So, I don't know how it would transfer.
I don't mind when the Dodgers spend a lot of money and have great success, because it shows that they are managed very well. Yes. I liked the Yankees and Dodgers in the World Series. I thought that was really good, and I root for a team that doesn't spend any money. The Washington Nationals are 24th in the standings in terms of payroll.
And I agree with Tony on seeing the Yankees and the Dodgers in the World Series. That's cool. That's a good thing. But you also want to have teams that don't just, throw in the towel and say, well, if it's like the Ricky Bobby thing. If you ain't winning, you're losing. And teams like the Miami Marlins, who really made a joke of this thing years ago, like when they would win the World Series and then dismantle the team the next day. And as far as what goes on with the Nationals, you may have seen the story. We talked about it the other day that Barry Zerluga wrote with an interview with Mark Lerner, the owner of the Nats, who said, well, I don't want to just sign a high-money guy so we can get 2 or 3 more wins. They're looking at load. He thinks and says they're looking at loading up to make another run like they did from 2012 to 2019. But on the other hand, they're not really spending any money. The biggest signing was like a $6 million contract, a one-size-fits-all that they gave to Josh Bell, who's back again as a DH. He was a first baseman here for a while, then went to a couple other teams and has returned. But there's no big splash here, and there's no real spending. The Jason Worth deal was what put them on the map, and it was seen at the time as overpaying for a free agent, but Jason Worth gave them credibility as an organization. It got them in with Scott Boras, who became a de facto general manager for a long period of time, but he also delivered Max Scherzer, and Max Scherzer was one of the biggest reasons that they won the World Series and had a great team for the period of time that he was here. So you got to look at it a number of ways, but I think that the big number is going to be the salary cap floor, not necessarily the top of the cap. And you can negotiate it in the way that the NBA does it with the soft cap. When they first put it in the late 70s, it was to save the league. The owners went to the players and said, we can't operate like this. We don't have a television contract. This is pre-Magic and Bird. They're playing the NBA Finals on tape delay at night. It was a different ballgame. And they said, you want to have a league? You got to have a cap. So they went, okay, we'll have a cap. And then Larry Bird comes up for free agency with the Celtics, and Red Auerbach goes, hey, this can't work. We can't lose our best player. So they came up with the Bird exception. And that was you could overpay over the cap to keep your best player. And things evolved to the point where, as Wilbon says, you got to have 3 guys making $30 million a year to have a competitive team. And who knows? I don't understand any way that the cap works. I mean, how were the Phoenix Suns able to absorb the contracts that they were able to take on? I guess the luxury tax allows you to do that. But yeah, I think a cap. A cap is inevitable in baseball. Will it happen next time around when the collective bargaining agreement comes up in 2026? I don't know. But I think as time goes on, to operate as competitively as possible, I think you need to have a cap. Because, again, it's not just the Dodgers spending like this. It's the other teams who don't have to spend because you don't have a salary cap floor. All right, lots to talk about with the hockey game tonight, U.S. and Canada in Boston. We'll have a look back on that tomorrow, as well as good stuff happening on the weekend as the pros get back to business, as hockey season resumes for the Capitals, and college basketball really ramps up. Big game for Maryland tonight against USC, which we'll also talk about tomorrow. Bram is next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.